Welcome to Business Leaders Coach, the podcast that educates, equips, enables, and empowers you to grow yourself, your business, and enjoy your life. Today, I am so excited. I have a very great friend who's been on the show before, and that is Obi Abuchi. Now, you've got to know Obi. He's passionate about helping leaders. He's the CEO, founder of Core Leaders International, and he has written several books. His new book has just dropped, and that is Leading from Your Core. And so I'm excited to welcome Obi to the show. Obi, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Toye. It is great to be back on the show. Great to be with you. This is such an exciting resource for leaders. I know it will serve so many people. So really great to have your podcast back up.
Yes.
And great to be here.
Well, no, welcome. And I'm really excited about this because this is something that we've talked about for quite some time. I've read the book. I mean, it's a brilliant resource. And so we're going to dig into this. I'm sure a lot is going to come out from this. And I hope our listeners are going to be taking notes because I'm sure you've got a lot to share. So let's just start off by asking, so what led you to writing this book?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's always, whenever I pick up a book, and I've heard about books over the years, you always hear about the motivation behind the book. And very often there are several. And for me, there are several, but there are two that I want to focus on for now. One is when I wrote my first book, The Magic of Monday, and that came out in 2012. And it was focused on young professionals and young people discovering and navigating a fulfilling career. And I say to people that imagine that book sold, I'll make a number, 1,100 copies. I think my mum bought 1,000 of those. She was incredibly supportive. As I said, it was geared towards young people and young professionals, but I think she bought it for the older generation, the kids in school. She would buy it for them. Anyone on the street, she'd say, hey, my son's just reading a book. And so that was 2012. 2014, she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And I grew up with my mom, a single mom. My dad passed away when I was very young. And so mom has been a significant influence in my life and a significant support. And it was quite tough when she was diagnosed. At the time, you just think of it as it's a diagnosis. What impact will it have? Maybe she'll be one of the lucky ones that isn't really affected by it. But over time, her memory clearly deteriorated. Her personality was changing. Yeah, one of the things she would do often is refer to the character in my book. So I wrote the book in the form of a fable, and the main character was Josh. And she would say to me, almost every single call we'd have, at the end of it, she'd say, Josh is patiently waiting. And what she meant was, when are you going to write another one? And at the time, I had joined an amazing consultancy. I was thriving in my career. I thought, Mum, that's it. I've done my bit. That's tick off my bucket list. But she would say it over and over again. And it sowed a seed. And I had this incredible passion to start my own business and build and speak and write and serve leaders in a unique way. And so with Mum's reinforcement every single time of Josh is patiently waiting, eventually I got that bug again. And I thought, it's time to start the business. It's time to get going with writing the book. And I started that in 2018. And then here it is now. And I get the other thing. So obviously Mum had a significant role to play in inspire me to get it off. The other thing that's a really important motivation, and I actually share a bit of this in the book, was the pandemic and 2020, 2021. Just I saw how devastating it was for leaders and how much it was rocking leaders to their core. My wife, Biju, and I, we went into the woodlands near us with our boys one day, and we see this. I see something on the ground that grabs my attention. I go close to take a look at it, and I end up taking a photo of this huge tree that was on the ground. And I was really curious, why is this tree on the ground and every other tree is standing? And in the end, the reason it was on the ground was because it had very shallow roots. And that's one of the things that I see with a lot of leaders today. We're being devastated and knocked by all sorts of things in the marketplace, at home. And without shallow roots, or without deep roots, we don't have the resilience that we need to navigate life and to really be the best leaders that we are. So that's the other motivation for me, helping leaders develop those deep internal roots, that internal core of their character and their beliefs and their values that help them to navigate business, navigate life, win hearts and minds of the people that they serve, and really build and leave a legacy that matters to them.
Oh, no. Thanks for sharing that. It's interesting to hear sort of the whole background about how you've been inspired to be able to write this, and the role that your mom has played. God bless her, because there's a legacy there, which is kind of profound. Is how, despite her challenges, that she has inspired you to do something that, Obi Abuchi, the name, will continue, through this, which is amazing. That it's your mom that actually, inspired you. That's kind of very, very profound. We might not see it in the immediate, but the fact that that's your story, it shows that every generation plays their role, if that makes sense. Like your mom has played her role to get this out, which is amazing, isn't it?
Without a doubt.
So I mean, I'm guessing the people maybe listening are saying another book on leadership, so what makes this book unique?
There are lots of books on leadership, and I said that there are many elements that were a motivation for me writing this. And I'll just tell you a quick story about one of the first leadership or personal leadership books that I got. So when I was 18, a mentor of mine gave me a copy of Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And it had a profound impact on me. I'm sure it's had a profound impact on, I know we've talked about it. Many of the people listening, if they haven't read it, absolutely should. It was just incredibly foundational. And I remember, I think I probably wrote on every single page, annotated and internalized. It just set me on this trajectory of understanding the significance of personal growth. And I'm only 18 at the time. I wasn't even thinking about leadership development or personal development, organizational development, any of that. I just thought, whoa, so you mean there's a way that I can think that transforms me, that helps me be at my best, that helps me have a huge impact in the world? There are so many of the exercises and activities in that book that I still apply today. So that was foundational, and it set me on a path, even though I wasn't clear about it at the time, but it set me on this path, this trajectory of being passionate about personal leadership and really understanding what it means to lead myself. And so fast forward and many experiences later, I've seen so much, and I've been working in leadership development now for over 10 years. And I've seen so much about leadership that's strategic, and let's focus on the vision, and let's look at governance, and how do we organize the company and the business. And all of that's absolutely critical and important. And there's that external facing. And then you've got leadership that is focused on the tactical, the operational. How do we operationalize our vision? Yes. How do we make it a reality? How do we engage our teams? And how do we win hearts and minds? So, and all of that's absolutely important. And then there's a third element, which is not the strategic and the organizational, not the team, but me as the leader. Who am I? And how am I looking after myself? And I mentioned the story of the tree earlier on, and just realizing that a lot of leaders they lead by virtue of their position. They're in this position of authority. They've got the resources at their disposal, but they don't have the internal character. I share this story in the book as well. Whenever I fly, I always tune into the air host or air hostess saying, hey, if there's an incident and the oxygen masks come down, put your oxygen mask on first. And we hear that, and that's a great analogy, but it's incredibly powerful for leaders to make sure they're putting their oxygen masks on and they are at their best, because I say this to leaders all the time: you cannot give what you don't have. And so where this book is unique is it's pretty much focused on that leading self element. And it's not just about, hey, have a diary and write your notes and hey, know your values. I go deep. I actually say to people at the start of the book, sorry, this isn't for the faint-hearted. If you're looking for something that's easy, I can recommend several books to you. You can go out there. But this is about doing the hard work of leading from the inside out, of being really clear about your values, really clear about your mindset, really clear about the habits that maximize your energy, really clear about your beliefs. And then how do you make sure that you're leading from a place of character, not just by virtue of your position? Because people will obey you because of your position, but they'll respect you and will be loyal to you when they value your character. And so those are some of the things that I talk about in my book, and that's what makes this unique.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant, and love the whole analogy about put your oxygen mask on first, which is fundamental, And as you know, 7 Habits. I'm sure anybody who's listening to this that knows me know that whenever I train, that is the one book that I always recommend as well. So yeah, definitely. And yeah, I've read the book. Obviously, I wrote something in it myself. Thanks for taking that. But and I think this whole idea of putting your oxygen mask on first. One of the things I talk about is this 5 daily habits, think, plan, do, reflect, learn. And thinking is obviously important. And obviously, one of the first things you start off with is what you really think about leadership matters. So maybe you can talk us through, because I guess if you're going to put the oxygen mask on first, your thinking about leadership definitely influences that. So maybe you can talk us through what you mean about that from the book. And because we want to make this really practical for our listeners. So,
so I've heard one of the statements that I hear from a lot of the leaders that I've trained and coached and interacted with over the years is, I'm trying to do my day job. I've got targets to meet. I've got activities to achieve. And then there's the people stuff. And I've got to engage with them, or there are some issues. And I wish I could just get on with my work and not have to deal with the people issues. And I think what's behind that from a thinking perspective is there are lots of people that see leading and overseeing and inspiring people as a task that has to be managed, almost like I manage inventory. I've got to manage my budget. I've got to manage people. No, you don't do that. You don't manage people. You lead people. And that means vision. That means engaging. That means inspiring. Organizations talk all the time about oh, we want to win the hearts and minds of our people. And then all of a sudden you treat them like they're just a number and a task and inventory that, oh, how many people are there? And let's stack them up. No, if you're trying to win hearts and minds, then you got to connect with your own as a leader and figure out how do we connect with the hearts and minds of people. And so when I say what you think about leadership matters very early on in the book is I'm trying to say, guys, you've got to think about how you are inspiring your people. And that starts with connecting with your own heart. Do you know what you stand for? Do you know what you're about as a leader? Are you clear about your own leadership philosophy? Even the idea of putting your oxygen mask on, why would you do that? Because you know, hey, I want to be at my best. If I have someone in my team, and I was training some leaders recently, and we were talking about the challenge of empathetic listening, for example. And the reason that that's a challenge sometimes is that leaders are so full. We've got so many things to do that when someone interacts with us, we've got their emotional journey and our emotional journey, and we're not always aware, we're not always in tune with that. And so they come, they need our help, they need us to unblock something, remove an obstacle, but we're so focused on all of the things that we've got to do that we say, oh, this interruption, instead of absolutely, this is an opportunity for me to inspire someone and know them and grow them so that they can become more capable and go on and deliver what I need them to as part of the team. And so this is really important that leaders take to heart what it means to make sure I'm clear about who I am, what I stand for, and therefore this is leadership.
And with that, I mean, so do you think that because some of the reasons why I'm guessing that you just use this example about being empathetic, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners will say, yeah, I mean, I've got all these objectives and deadlines and everything. And so when do I have the time to focus on myself? You get my point? Because sometimes there's this whole idea of I feel guilty when I'm putting the oxygen mask on first, if that makes sense. You get my point? Like there could be a sense of, some people might have this perspective that I've just got to be out there all the time, and when I do that I get burnt out. And so how do I balance this? Because I am trying to serve the people, but I'm doing that at the expense of my own sort of well-being. So how what's the perspective, the right perspective to have on leadership when there's sometimes that's another challenge?
Yeah. I want to make this as practical as possible. And I'm no neuroscientist or psychologist, but a lot of the research that I have studied talks about the impact of just clarity on our thinking when we are at our best. And so what I do know is that if someone is really stressed, they've got higher levels of cortisol in their body. And what that does, yes, often that means that we're running on adrenaline and we're able to do things quickly. And that's really useful in a fight or flight situation. But what it also does is it clouds our thinking. And we're not able to bring our best thinking and our best work and the opportunity for innovation and really serving our customers, clients, depending on what business we are in. If I'm calmer, then I'm able to think and ask some better questions. And I always say the quality of your questions, and not that this is from me, I've taken it from people over the years, but the quality of your questions determines the quality of your answers. So if you want better answers, if you want better output in your business, then you've got to ask better questions. And so at a very practical level, if I'm taking the time as a leader to put my oxygen mask on, then I can ask better questions. And here's an example of a question that I connected with recently, as I was just thinking, even in my own business, how can I create the most good for the people that I work with and the customers that I serve? So how can I create the most good? And what that gets me doing is thinking about the impact. It gives me confidence as I go out there and serve, as I engage my team and think about the vision and what we're doing. That gives energy. But so many leaders are operating in a space where they say, I don't have time for this. And therefore it's negative energy, it's cortisol, it's stress. Just because you're engaging in activity doesn't mean that it is having the desired impact and that it's making a difference. So leaders need to really think about just, is this activity for activity's sake, or is this activity that is really moving us forward, that is energizing people? And that only comes from putting your oxygen mask on and saying, I want to be at my best, so I'm thinking clearly. That's just one practical example of how this plays out and the difference it can make.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. The other thing I wanted to ask around was when you talk about ego versus the servant leadership perspective, because I think, the other thing about what you really think about leadership is, and you mentioned this already, like title and stuff like that. Obviously, that's coming from an ego perspective. So talk us through how you see those distinctions, but more important, how can somebody, what can they actually then do if they found themselves, based on how you're going to describe the ego path, how do they redirect themselves onto the other path?
Sure. Yeah. So some people might think, oh, where's this whole ego and service mindset? And in the introduction of my book, I talk about this, and partly it's to put people off. I've written the book for those who want to play a specific game. And over the years, I've seen leaders play two games. One is the ego game, and there are several levels of the ego game. And it's all about, regardless of whether it's level 1 or level 5, it's all about me. It's what do I achieve and how do I look? And what's my reputation, and what rewards am I getting, and how do I compare to that other leader, and how's their budget? Are they being given more than me? Are they seen as better than me, or am I better than them? But it's very shallow. It's all about me. It's about what I can achieve. The people that are in my team, the people that are in my organization are ultimately, despite what I may say, are ultimately there to serve me. And so if there's a situation where I've got to sacrifice someone, I will always sacrifice the other person, because I need to make sure that I'm looking after me and my empire. That achieves results without a doubt. You can still serve customers. What you won't do, though, is win hearts and minds. What you won't do is achieve loyalty. In my book, I talk about just the idea of firms of endearment. So organizations that are really about serving all of the stakeholders. And that's when you start playing the second game, which is the service game. So similar activities, but your thinking and your questions. So the question that I mentioned earlier on, how can we do the most good? How can I know my people and grow them? How can I grow the capability of the people in my team? So the way this can play out practically is that if I'm focused on serving people in my team or who report to me, then I'm not afraid to see them grow, because I know that as they grow, I'm growing. So if I run a 10 million pound business, for example, and I grow the people in my team to the capacity where they can run 10 million pound businesses, then all of a sudden, imagine I have 10 people reporting into me, that's suddenly 100 million pound business, right? So the payoff is huge. Yet so many people are more committed to the ego game. And I think that's because that's what they know. How do you make that switch? I think you can make that switch at any level. And it really starts with one of the things that I talk about is not necessarily getting rid of the ego, but channeling your ego in service of others and saying, I don't want this to be about me. There's a much bigger game and more significant game that I can play, which is bigger than me. So how can I serve the people that I work with? How can I know them? How can I grow them? And how can I provide products and services that bring about the greatest good for our customers? As soon as you start asking those questions, you're playing a very different game. And it gives you a greater level of energy, a greater level of resilience, and a perspective that is way bigger than when you're just focused on you and your empire.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. I mean, just a few episodes ago, I talked about Simon Sinek's infinite game and his point about a just cause, and what you're just saying there is that the overall purpose of the business has to be bigger than everybody. It has to be service led. And in fact, the two episodes ago was last episode was on common service, about that, and about how as a leader you have to see things from how does it benefit the customer, and then everything sort of falls in, and it's not about you. So that's and unfortunately, hopefully we're getting there to have more of that shift, but it's we're still seeing a lot of people finding more sort of validation by the number of direct reports I have. Like I was speaking to somebody the other day, and they were saying that they've got a manager or leader in their organization who accumulates direct reports, doesn't want to delegate anything. It's like, well, how do you, this person needs your book, to make
if only
that
they would
shift.
read it. Oh.
I know. So let's sort of move forward in that, because now let's say we're choosing to take on this sort of servant leadership perspective. Obviously, I like what you've mentioned, which is that, yes, we can talk about strategy, we could talk about all those other things that are important. But what you're saying is that let's go from inside out, right?
Yes.
So what does having a strong core look like from your perspective?
Yeah, so the simplicity of core is that it's an acronym for clear values. And that's about your true north, which is something I know is you often talk about. It's really knowing what you stand for, what matters to you, what's your why. At the end of your life, what would you like people to say that you stood for, that you were about, that you believed in? So really being clear about your values. And why is that critical? Because it helps you stay grounded. It helps you make the right decisions when you are faced with a difficult decision. Knowing your values helps you decide, hey, this is what I want to stand for. We're just not going to make a corrupt investment. We're not going to compromise what we stand for. We're not going to engage with a supply chain that is promoting slavery, whatever the case may be. So it's that's really important. The second one is optimistic worldview. So it's this belief in reality. So it's not this fairy tale optimism, but it's a sense of perspective that I can see the truth, but I believe in the possibilities. And I have this faithful outlook on life that regardless of what we're going through and the challenges that we're facing, that the best is yet to come. And the really resilient leaders navigated COVID with this mindset that said, okay, this was unprecedented, this was challenging, but guys, I really believe that through this, we can innovate and become stronger than we ever thought we could be. So that's what optimistic worldview is. And then rewarding habits. There are so many, and you can think of habits as going to the gym, but I'm going deeper in terms of thinking of the habits of the mind and mental habits. So I'm talking about things like vulnerability, being vulnerable as as a leader, which helps you tap into more energy and more resilience and more innovation. I talk about habits of mindfulness. I talk about the habits of rest and renewal. I talk about the habit of reflection, taking that time to reflect and think, and how am I doing, and how aligned has my day been to my values, doing that, thinking about where I'm going. And then the final part is empowering beliefs. So this is all about, what do I believe about me? What do I believe about myself? It is insane the number of leaders or people in leadership positions who are crippled by imposter syndrome. And I think that's the other thing that drives that ego game. It's, will I be found out? Do I really have what it takes? Can I really make a difference? Do my direct reports really respect me? And so I get people to just explore, what's that inner critic in your head saying? Is it enabling you? Is it energizing you? What is true? What isn't? And how do you tackle that? How do you address that? That all of this is internal work. This is, being clear about your values, your worldview, your mindset, the habits that help maximize your energy, your beliefs. This is all internal work. This has nothing to do with how many widgets does your business sell, or how many people do you serve. It starts internal. But when you're clear about this, you go into a situation and you're no longer plagued by imposter syndrome, because you know what you stand for, you know what you're about, you're able to, and this isn't wishy-washy either. This isn't soft stuff. It's not about, therefore you go and cuddle everybody afterwards. You're able to have tough and challenging and difficult conversations, but from a grounded place, because you're really committed to bringing your best self to every situation that you are in.
Wow.
And all of that takes hard work.
That is hard work. I mean, that what you've said there is, it's not a stroll in the park kind of thing. Because I'm guessing that, even what you just talked about, empowering beliefs. I mean, from what I know, our beliefs are normally challenged in order for us to truly say that we believe. You get my point? Like, you have to sort of, you go through that test. So I'm guessing that, for you to have come to this sort of acronym of CORE, must have been part of your own journey. So, what are some stories that maybe you can share of challenges that you've gone through, so people can really understand that this is not just an academic kind of study, but you've also, you've had to get to this point yourself. Anything that you can share?
Yeah, I wish I could say I just woke up one morning and it came to me and, hey, Eureka, here's CORE. It was, so sometimes I talk about transformation. I'll get to the story, but I just want to share this, that sometimes I think of transformation as that journey that a caterpillar goes through to become a butterfly. There is a struggle. There is a wrestling. The whole science behind it is that the caterpillar's body has to break down and then it sort of rebuilds. And I feel like I've had so many of those breaking down and rebuilding experiences. Core Leaders International isn't my first time at trying to build a business. I remember shortly after being married, my wife and I had this great idea. We were going to create these cards that would be games that could go be sold all around the world. The airlines will take them. Every single game company will take them. And we ended up being swindled out of 5,000 of these, which is a long story I'll share another time, but that was Demi Bucci Inspirations. And then we started a business called Inspironect, and we thought, yes, inspiring experiences and will make a difference. And that fell flat. And then I thought, okay, Obi, so the entrepreneurial world isn't for you. Just go find a job somewhere. And then afterwards I thought, no, I want to have another go at this. And I'm going to create motivatum and motivational events and inspire people and transform. And that shortly after that was when I released my first book, The Magic of Monday, What's really interesting about that experience, though, with the Magic of Monday is that when it came out, it was probably one of my darkest periods in life, because I was trying to build this business and just couldn't get it off the ground. And the economy was challenging. And I was eventually, at the time my book came out, The Magic of Monday, I was paying our mortgage on the credit card. It was depressing. So people would say to me, congratulations. And I talk about imposter syndrome. I felt like an imposter. I thought, no way. If only you know, you're saying thank you. And here I am giving you a copy of my book. And I'm thinking, okay, that might buy dinner for us tonight as I exchange it for £15 or whatever. And it was so depressing. Generally speaking, growing up, I've never really thought about suicide. In fact, to my shame, in a sense, I would say whenever people would talk about suicide, I say, you're so weak, that's terrible, you know. But that was a season where I just felt, I think I felt so ashamed. I felt so embarrassed. I just felt so inadequate. I thought, I cannot do this. I can't do this. I can't build a business. And I remember standing at one of the tube stations once and looking at the rail tracks and thinking that the feelings of depression and doubt and darkness and sadness were so real. It was almost a tangible pain that I thought I would love this to be over with. And really for a few seconds just contemplated suicide. And what came out of that, it's actually, I don't remember all of the things that helped, to be honest. I think friends and support and my faith and all of that helped. But as a result of going through that time, I remember coming across a quote. I think it's attributed to Aristotle: the hardest victory is over self. And it dawned on me that, Obi, this is hard. This is hard. You're trying to make it look like it's easy, that you just wake up and all of a sudden I had this incredibly, I say to people, I was so naive, tons of zeal, but almost zero knowledge, because I thought, oh, month one, I'm going to make £10,000, a month two, £20,000, a month three, £30,000, a month six, 60. But I was in the red. And I just thought, Obi, this is hard work. This is difficult stuff. You're going to have to push through. You're going to have to learn. And that got me a lot of the things that I had read over the years and a lot of the ideas that I had internalized. I thought it's now time for you to start applying this, not just in an academic sense, but in a practical sense, and work out what works and what doesn't. And that was where a lot of this came from. I just thought, I talk about that tree. The reason I recognize that tree in the woodlands is because I've been that tree. I've been that person who on the outside looks strong and confident and eloquent and all of that, but just realizing internally, I don't have the structure that is needed to carry the weight of the responsibilities that I'm trying to take on. And it would be like a baby trying to lift 50 kilogram weights. You can't do that, regardless of physically how I appear. On the inside, I just didn't have that internal moral character structure that was needed to handle the challenges that I was facing. And so I had to stop seeing it as just a challenge, but actually a gift that God, in a sense, some people would say the universe, but I believe God was giving me to say, this is your opportunity to really become the sort of person that can navigate these sorts of challenges. And as they say, the rest is history. And for me, it's the birth of Core Leaders International. So I know this works. I use it for me and use it with the leaders. And I believe in it deeply because of all of the difficulties that I've been through personally.
Wow, that's a fantastic, amazing And yes, I mean, it's really great just to hear your own sort of journey to come into this place about the importance of, having these clear values and having an optimistic view. And as you know, it's interesting because you can sort of see how you come up with this core, even just from what you've said, that, what holds you together are your values, the perspective of life being optimistic, rewarding these kind of habits, and also empowering beliefs. So I hope people are taking notes on that. Obviously, we will be having, leaders, entrepreneurs, listening in, small, medium-sized companies. Any advice you might give, and the reason why I ask this question is because from what you're sharing, and I think from what two of us have talked about in previous kind of discussions, is that there is a distinction now between what I'm calling like 20th century leadership to 21st century leadership and perspective. So any kind of advice that you would give, or even a young budding entrepreneur or leader, what are some of the essential things that you might want to give them advice on?
Yeah, so there are two that come to mind, and I would honestly give these to my kids. I've got three boys, 14, 12, and 10 at the moment. And as aspiring leaders themselves in different ways, this is advice that someday I would want them to hear. The first one is actually inspired by my second son. So there was a day I was taking him to school. He was about 6 at the time. He's 12 now. And he was obsessed with the number 100. And he said to me, "Dad, you're going to live to be 100. And I just got, I thought it was funny because I'm 30 years older than him. So that would mean he'd be 70. And I just imagined us walking around in Zimmer frames, or just pushing our Zimmer frames and trying to catch our teeth as they fly out. And then it dawned on me. I just thought, wow, so 100, I'd probably be close to dying, if not or almost there. And I thought, what would they say about me? And it got me thinking about my funeral. And shortly after that, I wrote my eulogy. And actually, this is something that Stephen Covey encourages people to do in his book. I would encourage leaders to do that. I've written my eulogy from the perspective of my sons, from the perspective of my wife. It's just so important to know who you are, what you're about, what you're living for. What's the legacy that you're trying to build, and be intentional about it? That's what it helps you do. It helps you live on purpose, with intention, and not just get somewhere someday hoping you'll get there, but get there on purpose. And the second thing is related to it, that I was inspired by this many years ago, and it's now become a life quote for me, which is, don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive, and go and do that. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. You know a leader who's alive. You see it in their eyes. You see it in their passion for their people, in their passion for their customers, and their desire to know their people, grow them, innovate, bring the best of their energy. So don't just focus on, hey, what do people need, and what do my shareholders need, but just what makes you come alive, what helps you be your absolute best, what engages your heart and mind. Because when you do that, you will be on fire for your people, on fire for shareholders if you're in that sort of organization, and on fire for your team, for your customers. And so those two things, obviously very aligned to just the internal work of making sure that you are at your best in order to be at your best for those around you. So that would be my advice to leaders.
Oh, that's brilliant. I love that quote about coming alive. Yeah, I mean, and I think that unfortunately sometimes we don't realize that because we only have this one life, why not Why? What's holding you back from coming alive? Where else do you want to come alive? Yeah.
No.
You think of it from that perspective, it's like, why not?
Yes.
But,
Indeed. I'm a Bon Jovi fan. And so I love, I just want to live while I'm alive, right? And that's it. It's live and lead while you're alive.
Absolutely. So just to, as we begin to wrap up again, so who would you actually say is your target audience for the book? I know in terms of perspective, it's people who are willing to take on the challenge of maybe embracing a more challenging perspective of what it means to be a leader. But in terms of sort of target audience, who would you say this is for?
This is for leaders in organizations, whether that's small, medium, large enterprises who are eager to make a difference to the people around them. So if you've got responsibility for people who report to you, then this book is for you.
Okay, brilliant. And any kind of goals you have now that this is just dropped, end of September? I got my copy as soon as the very day, it arrived. So what are some of the goals that you have? I'm guessing, to get this in the hands of many people. What are some of the things you have?
Yeah, so yes, I'd love the book to get into the hands of many people. More than that, the message, I'm really keen for the message to get into the hands, the hearts, the minds of leaders around the world. So a couple of things that I'm doing. I'm launching a podcast in November called Leading from Your Core. I'll be sharing yes, I'll be sharing some of my own experiences, just insights from leaders and experts that I've gained along the way over time. I'll also be having leaders on the podcast. In fact, I'm looking forward to having you on the podcast. So this is my formal invitation to you. And so that's kicking off, and that's going to be really, really critical and exciting. And then in January, I'm really excited, I'm launching a Personal Mastery Academy. It's one thing to read a book and to get ideas. It's another thing to begin to integrate those ideas into your life. The 7 Habits wasn't just a great book for me because it just gave me some nice mental stimulation. It was a great book for me because I implemented the ideas in the book. And so what I'm doing with the Personal Mastery Academy is giving people an opportunity to assess where they're at and begin to integrate these ideas into their life so that they get the huge benefits of that increased resilience, that impact, and that energy from all of the ideas that I talk about in the book. So 17th of January 2022 is when the Personal Mastery Academy goes live. So that's something I'm really excited about at the moment.
Brilliant. Excellent. So we'll have some of those in the show notes and how people can reach you. Do you want to just share?
Sure. So people can reach me via my website, so www.coreleaders.co.uk, or my personal website, www.obiabuchi.com, or they can reach me on LinkedIn. So Obi Abuchi on LinkedIn, Twitter. You can search me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. So all of the usual channels.
All right, excellent. So we'll make sure we have all those links in the show notes at Business Leaders Coach, where you'll be able to watch as well as listen to this podcast. So I want to encourage everybody, get your copy. And more important, obviously, as we've said, it is not about just reading it. It is about turning it into action, putting it into action, challenging ourselves. I'm going through it myself. I think some of the points that Obi has mentioned today are so important. Clarifying your values, that's something that it's a lifetime thing that we need to hold to. Having this optimistic worldview, I think what we've gone through, nobody could ever anticipate what we would have gone through in 2020, 2021 with the pandemic, and actually is an optimistic worldview that's going to keep us hopeful that we are looking forward to a better world. And then rewarding habits. Again, I think those daily habits are so important of what you mentioned, Obi, and an empowering belief that underpinning everything, there's got to be a belief that drives us. So, Obi, I really want to thank you for sharing your wisdom. There's a lot more I would have loved to cover. Maybe we're going to have you back again because there's some areas that I still want us to discuss, just about the middle manager kind of thing, and because some people want to be putting this into practice. Maybe I can ask it as a final question, because I'm guessing if I am a middle manager and I'm clear on my values, but this is not the culture of the organization I am in. Let's maybe ask that as a final question. What would be your advice to that person in terms of what they can do?
Yeah, so I actually, whilst I don't talk about it being a focus for middle management, I do address this tension in my book. In a lot of organizations, they will have a specific set of values and principles and a philosophy. I don't believe that your personal values have to be exactly the same as your organization's values, but they do need to be complementary. And a big part of that is you taking the time as a leader yourself, regardless of whether it's middle, frontline, senior, being really clear about what's my leadership philosophy. How do I see leadership? How do I want to bring out the best in people? And then if your overall leadership philosophy is in line with and complementary with the philosophy of your organization, then great, you can thrive there. If it's not, then the only place that you're forced to be, that you cannot leave, is prison. Everywhere else, it's a choice. So you've got to choose to be in a place that helps you to give your absolute best. And I think a lot of organizations can, if they complement what you stand for. And if not, then you've got to make a choice to be somewhere that helps you be your absolute best.
Yeah, Obi, you're absolutely right. It's important that we always remind ourselves that we can always make a choice. Obi, I want to thank you for being on the Business Leaders Coach podcast and sharing your wisdom with us. Definitely, if you're listening to this, you want to get your copy of Leading from Your Core. You can get it from Amazon or any of the bookstores, and definitely get your copy. But more important, read it. Even more important, apply it. Obi, it's always great talking to you, and I want to thank you for sharing all what you've done with us today. I hope our listeners find this very, very helpful because of what you've talked about, the importance of building from the inside out. And again, I just want to thank you so much for sharing all this today and wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Hey, Toye, thanks so much for having me on the show. An absolute joy to be with you again. Bye-bye.